Hey viewers, this is Spencer Colgan from Spencer Colgan is Wallpaper. Thanks for coming by once again to watch my wallpaper and painting video series. Let me give you an overview of what we have coming up for you in this video. I'm going to show you lots of tricks and tips on painting. I'm going to show you how to use tape and caulking to cut straight lines against trim, against this accent wall, and how to use a paintbrush properly in order to get the best results. You're going to learn what to do and what not to do. I'll show you the benefits of painting trim with a brush, and then I'll show you how to do it with tape and caulking against the floor. I'll show you how to paint vertical trim like you see here, using tape and then without it. I'll show you how to paint the wall just above doorways and closets using a paintbrush and what type of brush is best to get into your situation. I'll also show you how we cut trim and how we cut walls against trim by going what's called freehand, like you see here. And then if you're not proficient enough, we'll show you how to do it in another way. Ever try to get a brush into the corner and wind up getting an inch or two of paint onto your ceiling? Well, that won't happen to you after you watch this video. Check out this technique coming up. How about using a paint roller? What size roller should you use? How do you use it? What do you have to do to the roller before you do the wall? I'll show you here. How about painting those textured walls right up against the ceiling? Ever try to do this? Be honest, did you get the paint onto the ceiling? Well, that won't happen again. So how about we get started and show you how to do all of these nifty tricks.
For those of you who have ever tried to paint a straight line against a textured wall or ceiling, you know how difficult it can be. I want to show you a couple of easy steps that you should take when you're trying to draw a straight line against texture, even if you're a do-it-yourselfer. First of all, you have to start out with the right brush. I highly recommend a brush of high quality. This is a Purdy 4-inch. It retails for about $27, and it's medium stiff. So you should have yourself a dip bucket, and then you land the brush about 3.5 inches from the surface where you want to cut, because you don't want all that paint up there. So you spread it out down here, then you bring that brush up with a medium amount of paint on. You see how the brush is skipping and it's leaving some areas that are not painted? You see that? Well, you know how you take care of that? You're going to go this way. You're going to go in the opposite direction, because those crevices cannot be painted in just one direction. The brush can't get into them. So you need to go in 2 directions. The benefit is that the whole area gets 2 coats of paint as you're doing this. You see there's still one right there if you look close. So you go in one direction, you just take note, not much of my brush is touching that top, not much. If you're using all the bristles, you're doing it wrong, because you're not going to be able to keep it straight. You want to use about 1 inch of the brush to paint the straight line. Again, you land the brush here, you go back and forth. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. If you were to paint this surface, you see all of these areas that's skipping? Your brush can't get in there on the first go like that. You have to keep going like that and that, back and forth. Well, you can imagine up at the top, the same is true, right? And so we go in one direction first. Again, take note at the small amount of space of my brush touching that tip, that corner. And look at all of the crevices I missed. Let's go back in the other direction. Let's finish it off. That's how you paint a straight line against texture. So, you want to cut a line against your ceiling and your wall, but you're doing it on texture, not the easiest task to do. Let me show you how I do it, and you can pick up anything that you see here that you like and employ the same technique. Look at how I hold the brush. Where am I holding the brush? Look at the type of brush that I'm using. Look at where I'm leaving the paint on the wall. I haven't gone near that ceiling yet. And look at how many inches my brush is. Now I'll explain. Number one, I'm using a Purdy 4-inch medium stiff bristle brush. I'm leaving the paint 2 to 3 inches below the ceiling so that I can go back to it, like I'm doing right now. I'm holding the brush on the metal barrel. That's where the bristles are all joined together in a wood stock. It gives me greater control over the brush and the line I'm trying to draw. Now zoom in, please. What I'm trying to do is flood the crevices where the wall meets the ceiling. There's all little bumps and holes. So I'm going to load up the brush more than I normally would if the wall were flat. And I'm trying to put puddles of paint in actuality into those crevices. And so if you're zoomed in, you'll see that I'm dropping a lot of paint in those holes. Because they got to be filled. If you just pass them, you'll color the outside, below, above, but your paint will not go in those holes because you got to flood them. You see right here? It's not filled with paint. So now I push the paint in. Let's do it again. Again, I go in this direction. Now with the texture, you want to go left to right, and then since these crevices can be filled better at different angles, you want to go now right to left, and that fills 98% of your little crevices, as you can see. Another helpful hint, don't breathe while you're doing this. Your breathing could affect your hand when you're going really slow. And so you may want to hold back with taking big gasps of air for a moment. Now, after that, we take a roller so that the brush texture doesn't interfere with the texture of our roller. So we're rolling the wall. So I'm going to take a roller after this and roll horizontally, and then the man on the roller is going to roll vertically up and down and come as close to the ceiling as he can. And I'll show you. Just keep them right up there. I'll show them what I mean by the horizontal rolling of the roller. so that they can do this too. While the wall is wet, we go right up to that ceiling to eliminate any brush strokes. We want the stipple of the roller. The man who's rolling the wall is going to come by like this and do that and roll vertically. There you have it. That's how you roll a wall while cutting it in at the top, the sides, and the bottom, all at the same time. This way, the entire wall gets painted at the same time, and the entire wall dries while it's all wet at the top, at the bottom, and on the sides. Okay? Before you start rolling paint, here's what I suggest you do. You see this roller? This is one of the finest rollers on the market. This is a 9-inch Purdy Ultra, half-inch nap. What does the nap mean? It means that the fuzz, so to speak, the nap, is a ½ inch from the scalp of the roller. Secondly, it's 9 inches wide. Now, you can't just start rolling this on a matte finish. This paint is gonna suck the paint out of that roller, and so you want your roller fibers saturated with paint right down to the scalp. So we're going to actually waste a little paint here to save the roller and make the wall look universally colored. We're gonna just discharge it. We're gonna mash that paint into the roller fibers by now pushing that paint into the fibers, the hairs of that roller. And you see, you can call it waste, but the roller is now getting really nice and wet and saturated right down to the scalp of the roller. You see, if you don't do this, if you start this up where you want to go, after the paint job is done, you take a step back from 10 feet, you will see a disproportionate amount of what's called saturation. In that, the proportion of liquid of the paint will be far different over there than it is over here and all the way across the wall. And why is that? Because if your fibers are not wet, they're drinking the paint while the wall is drinking the paint. And so why not let the roller and the wall drink the same amount of paint out of that roller? But you have to do this first. You see, you have to saturate the fibers in the roller. And then that column will look universal to all of the rest of them. And that's how you start the first stroke of your roller. Cutting corners. So how do you get the paint up into the corner without touching the ceiling? First of all, let's show you how to dip into a bucket. Take note that no more than half of the bristles have paint on them. 2, please take note that these bristles will wet with water before I begin to paint. Why is that? At the end of the day, if I should choose to clean this brush, the paint comes off of damp bristles far more easily than it does dry ones. You dip into the bucket, just tap the side, knock off the excess. You start away from the corner, going up and down. We got a texture here. Look at that texture. We got to get in and out of there, right? Okay, you don't want to flick paint around. So you don't want to, I'm going to flick it for you so you don't do it. Look, watch this. See the difference of what I'm about to do? My brush is not coming off of that corner. I'm simply going back up when I get down to the bottom and back down when I get to the top. My brush is not lifting off. If it does, I flick paint. 4th, I come up near that corner where the ceiling meets the walls, and here's what I do. I pivot my brush against the wall and I push the bristles up toward the ceiling. Watch this. See that? I'm using the brush like it's a hinge. And I want to do this about 4 inches from the corner. I want to draw a nice straight line, taking my time. This is one area where you want to take your time, okay? And you just want to look, you just want to go up. So the brush stays in the corner and you just pivot it. See that movement? And we'll do it here too. If you try to rush this, you'll wind up painting that ceiling and making a mess. All right? When you have a very dark color like this, be very careful near adjacent white surfaces, such as walls, if you're painting the ceiling this color, or ceilings if you're painting the wall this color, as I am, or trim. If you come near that like this, you want to be careful not to flick the paint. Okay, so that's how you paint in a corner when you're painting a wall. You're painting straight lines up against trim. You may be tempted to do it by hand, like this. But if you're not proficient with a hand paintbrush, or if your hand is not steady, you may want to put tape on the white edge here so that your paint can be nice and straight, especially with a dark color such as this. But if you were inclined to do it by hand, here's what I would suggest. Number one, use a good brush. This is a Purdy. It retails for about $26. And look at where I'm holding the brush. I have full control over those bristles, which are only about 5 inches from my hand. I start the brush about 1.25 inches away. I want to get all the excess off. And now watch. I'm using all of the bristles as opposed to when I do it at the top over there. I'm using all of the bristles, and I want to eliminate that swervy white line. Let's see how I do it. I'm going to drag it down. I'm going to limit my breathing. I'm not going too slow. If you do, you make it crooked. Pull away when you finish off the line. Dip your brush again. Now folks, don't expect to get this done on one try. We're going to start from the bottom now. Opposite direction. Limit your breathing because it affects your hand. And that's how you cut a straight line with manually. Not the easiest task to do. If you don't trust your stuff and you don't want to waste a lot of time, put a piece of tape up against here and throw a little caulking after the tape, clear caulking, just a little bit, just to seal that tape. That's how you do it. And when you're painting over doorways, you don't want all the paint on the trim like a lot of painters will get. So here's what I do. See what I'm doing with the brush there? Oftentimes there's a space that your bristles can get behind. But if there's not, right up against the trim, just like this. I'm shimmying back and forth those bristles. This way, I'm not lifting them off of the wall so that they get onto the trim. And the bristles are forced to stop where the trim is. And you get a nice clean cut. Okay, so you painted your walls. They look beautiful. But you come up to these details and your hand got a little rickety, didn't cut a straight line. And your customer's not happy. You gotta fix it. I'm gonna show you the quick and easy way to fix this thing. Get yourself a hand masker, it's worth it. If you're painting your house yourself, put the hand masker with the tape straight, and it'll correct all of this. You see what remains? That's your crookedness right there. And we're gonna cut clear caulking into this, and then we're going to paint it with the white. We're gonna hit it with white. And this will be perfectly straight. Watch this. Your lines are crooked and it's unsightly. Can you show them in here? Show them how the green goes onto the white trim. It goes in a squiggly line, okay? I'm gonna show them how to avoid that. Well, actually, only a super steady hand can avoid it. I'm gonna show you how to fix it. After you paint your room, you have to go around and what I call perfect the job. Nothing's ever perfect until the end. So I put 1-inch tape. These walls are dry now about 2.5 hours. It might pull off a little of the green. In that case, I'll just touch it up. But I put 1-inch tape down here. Now, this is Sherwin-Williams tape. If you get the tape that's wrapped in plastic individually, do not buy it from 3M. I called them and I complained. It's heat shrunk. That plastic is heated around the roll of tape and it makes the tape impossible to unravel. They do a better job on rolls of tape that are at least 10 in a shrink-wrapped plastic wrap. I buy Sherwin-Williams. I never have a problem with their tape coming off of the roll. So why do I use the tape? I'm masking the green. I don't want to paint the green. I just want to paint the green in a 1/16 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch to make the line straight. Let me show you what I mean. Just focus there and show them. And we're going to get some clear caulking. As I do it, I'll tell you why I'm using clear caulking. This is a textured wall. That tape is not going to protect your textured wall from getting white paint under the tape. And so you want to use clear caulking so that when it dries, it takes on the color of green near the green and white near the white. Push it in. Push that into your tape seam so that you can close that opening that does exist. Okay, we're clogging that edge. Now just show them how that green paint is up onto our white. It's terrible. We're gonna fix it right now. Here we go. Now you want to use a controlled hand. Can you just go over me? You don't want to be swinging this brush around too much. If you do, the paint will splatter onto the green. I'm going in one direction. Strokes. Okay. Almost done. When you see the final effect, you will agree that this is the way to go. Now it's a little humid in here. The tape may pull off a little of the green. I hope it doesn't, but ideally it doesn't in an ideal environment. Okay, so now you see what we did. You get the idea. I'm going to pull off my tape and watch how I pull it off. I'm pulling it away. I don't want it banging into the painted surface. Take a look at that line. You would admit that's a lot better than that crooked line. Nice and easy and steady. Now show them that line.
So now you can see with caulking and tape, you can achieve a beautiful, brilliant, crisp, straight line. And you can do this anywhere.
Now when you're brushing your trim, many of you have written into me asking me, what's better, spray, brush? Well, that's a decision that you have to make based on the liability that silica dust may cause to furniture in the room. Secondly, if you're proficient with a sprayer. But if you're going to brush your trim, you can do it like this, but this would take a very skilled hand to cut these lines like this. So I'm going to show you a quicker way to do it. Especially at the bottom. To keep that paint off of the floor is not an easy task. And if you just watch the hand of a professional painter, you'll see that it takes time. Let's get this wire out of the way. Sorry. It takes time and precision. The closer you are to the floor, the better. That is not an easy thing to do. But now, let me show you, if you're the do-it-yourselfer, the way that you can cut that perfect line all by yourself without the need to be a professional. And it's going to take a simple tool, a 3M hand masker, a roll of tape, and some clear caulking. Now, if you didn't have the money to go out and buy this $60 gadget, you could use the tape, a 2-inch roll of tape, 2-inch wide. 1 inch is too thin, because when you go back and forth with your brush, you'll probably get it on the floor. But let's just say you have this tool. I'm going to show you a quicker way to do this. If your caulking gets swallowed up, because you did such a great job, put some more in this. And don't press so hard. Wipe the excess off. Holding the brush like this. Notice how I'm not holding it like that. You don't want to push too hard on that caulking. Nice and easy in the corners. Nice and easy. I'll show you the results. They're quite nice. Lots of paint on the bottom. You're going to put what's called in the trade the millage of 2 coats. What's nice about this is now, when you finish a long piece like this, just go from one end to the other, one steady direction, okay? And so, what we expect after that is that we'll have a perfect line. You see, all this movement with the brush is fine to get the paint in place. But when you finish off the
task, don't leave it where you've done this. Never leave it like that. You want to do this. You want to lay that out. Same thing here. There you go. Now, we're going to be painting these walls. So, you certainly could do this for the trim against this gray paint, but that would be a waste of your time. What I would suggest that you do is not to do this. Watch this. Watch all the time involved with trying to make this straight. Look, it's a lot of time. How about just do this? This way the trim gets a really good sealing coat right into that corner. And then when this dries, you simply put tape on top of what I'm doing right now. And then you paint the wall against your tape and caulking so that your wall paint doesn't get onto this the way you don't want this paint getting onto this. Right? Now, you came here to see how to make a nice straight line. Let's see if we accomplished our goal. How did we do? Now, if someone is saying, oh, look at all the time he took. Well, I'm making a video. A lot of critics on YouTube. A lot of critics. But this would only take about a minute and a half to get the tape on and caulked. And then another minute to paint it. That's it. 3M hand masker, 1-inch tape, clear caulking.
After you press the tape down onto the paint, you should know, number one, this paint should be dry at least 2 hours. It may be dry for years. You may just want to paint another wall dark. But if you just did this wall, 2 hours. Number two, clear caulking. Clear paintable caulking. Don't use colored caulking because the edge of the paint will leave the edge of the caulking. Once it dries white, you'll have red, white, and beige. So if you use clear, it'll dry to the color of the red or the beige, but you certainly won't see white. Number three, caulk the tape. Don't be afraid to get that caulking in there. Okay. Press firmly into that corner. You do not want that tape coming up. Just show them a nice close-up of this. This house is 100 years old. This corner has a lot of like bumps to it. I'm going in two directions. You want that caulking to fill in every nook and cranny. Now we're ready to paint it. Please give me the paint. Beautiful. I'm going up and down for the same reason that I went up and down with the caulking. When you get to the edge, just go in one direction. You don't want pooling on the edge. But above it, two directions. You want to get in every nook and cranny. But watch this, we're going to finish it off downward. Same thing up here. Two directions. And you want to put the amount that suffices for 2 coats. At the top, wiggle the brush, stop 2 inches before the ceiling and wiggle it. Stop 2 inches before the ceiling and wiggle it upwards. Let's see how we did. Let's take the paint and we'll show them how good or how poorly we did. Okay, can I take it off?
Mm-hmm.
Now when you pull it off, you don't want to let this go anywhere. Remember, it has red paint on it. So your hands are going to get a little dirty. You want to pull it towards you. Okay? Let me make sure I'm not causing that to happen. There's no way that brush got under there. It's the way I'm pulling it off. There you go. Okay. Now, with the exception of that mark right there, and the little ones up above, take a look at that line. Now, the reason why I failed was the way I pulled it off. I caulked that. There's no way that the paint got under there. That happened while I was taking it off. But take a look at that line. Look at how sharp and crisp it is. Now, unfortunately, I have to wait till the red dries. So I'll put a hair blower on it with a little heat to make it dry because I'm done now. And just come right up against it. But that's how you want to do a straight line. Just show them how nice this is right here, right up to my hand. Okay, and if you have to touch up, there's 2 ways you can do it. Now, if you made a mess of it, just redo it. But if you want to touch, there are foam brushes. They look like little wedges. They're like $2. They sell them at the artist store. You can just put a little paint on it. They're foam. And you just touch it and pull backwards. It has a sharp edge. Or, if you're a painter, you know how to do it. You just draw your straight line down with a nice, medium stiff brush. That's it. That's how you do it. See you on the next one.
Action.
So, I decided to show you how, if you're good with a brush, how you could just fix this little imperfection here. So join me. By the way, if you're ever rolling a dark wall next to a light wall, don't roll fast because you'll see a little splatter from the red on the white or vice versa. When you're near the wall, go slow. Okay, zoom in close. I want to show them this action. This is a synthetic brush. This is a 3-inch angle sash brush. Okay, you're going to notice I'm going to go one direction. Can they see that?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. If I can give you any advice, it's don't breathe while you're doing it. But if it takes you 2 minutes, start to breathe. Okay, now we come down here. Because we smudged the red, wasn't fully dry. One direction. Pull that brush off. She's being stubborn with me. We'll get it. Almost there. They can see that?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So if you fail to do the straight line like I failed, that's how you fix it. Or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, wait till it dries again and cut another line. But overall, that's how you draw a perfectly straight line between two dramatically different colors.
As you can see in this clip, you see the wall, how it bellies out right there? Well, you don't want to see that on the finished product. What the tape does on old walls like this is it gives the illusion that the wall is straight where it meets the trim. You see how you see the little areas where you see more trim than in other areas? Well, that's because there's a natural wave in these 100-year-old walls. We give the illusion with the tape, the caulking, and putting the paint in those reveal areas. We call them reveals. We give the illusion that you no longer have that imperfection. You see how the tape has to be perfectly placed and that you have to bring the wall paint onto the trim in order to hide those differentials in the reveals, you have to do it. I think you're going to love the finished product. I certainly loved it. As we continue to pan around the workspace, I just want to point out that it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to get the tape straight. Now, I don't suggest that you try to use a level or anything like that. You're looking at an old house. You want to do it in conformity with old house charm. That's sufficient right there. You see that? Just try to reveal 1/8 of an inch and no more of the wood in order to bring the paint onto the trim. I'm telling you, the product is amazing after you get done. And it transforms a wall. Who wants to look at gaps between the wood and the wall? And this fellow accepted that. He's lived with this for years. He thought it was just the way old houses had to look. But if you want to step up your painting game, get yourself a hand masker and learn this technique. I'm telling you, you won't regret it.
As quickly as possible, after painting against your masking paper that has caulk on it, remove it. This way there's no bridging. And the bridging is what takes place after the caulking starts to get firm. And then peeling this becomes almost like you're ripping a rubber band off of the woodwork. If the caulking begins to set up, it's not going to come off that cleanly. And that's how you do it. There's no more space, and the line is as straight as the trim and the wall has allowed me to make it. Let's look up that line. Isn't that much more beautiful than looking at a space between your trim and your wall? Remember, we brushed off the dust, put our tape down. We didn't come back to it a day or 2 or 3 days later. This tape will stick to the trim if you leave it on too long. Check with the roll of tape that tells you how much hang time, it's called hang time, until it becomes a problem to remove. This is my favorite. When you remember that ugly space between the trim and the wall, and now you're looking at a nice caulked area that receives paint and caulking and joins the wall and the trim. I can't help but to think how much more beautiful it looks than that ugly, unsightly space. But now, look at how we're going to pull it off. To eliminate any setup or bridging that may have begun to set in, I'm pulling the paper directly on itself. Not this way, not at a 90, but completely at a very low degree against itself, about 5 or 10 degrees. And that will eliminate any temptation on the part of the caulking to bridge and to give you an uneven line. You see how it obeys and just gives you a nice straight clean line? Pull it on itself. Look at how beautiful. So you dust off the trim, go as straight as you can with the tape, and then caulk. Putting the caulking over the tape and into the crack between the trim and the wall. Then with clear caulking, you fill it in after you tape and then paint it right away. Don't leave a lot of time for that caulking to set up. And then remove this tape as soon as possible. You bought a beautiful old house, or even a new one, and the last painter was not a professional. Come in close. You have paint on your trim. Well, let me tell you something. If you don't have the time to get all of this off and then restore the damage that you may do to the trim by trying to get it off, I want to show you a way that's very practical that'll make this look beautiful. Now, as painters and finishers, we know just by the way we do our work, what people look at, and we know how to make things look perfect without them being perfect. That's what a good painter does that. I hang wallpaper. A good wallpaper hanger does that. We have to deal with a lot of imperfect environmental variables in order to make our products look perfect. But in reality, nothing is ever perfect, but it may look perfect. We're going to create an illusion. First of all, I hate space between wood and wall. I hate it. I don't know how a painter gets away with painting it without caulking it. But in this case, we have a sloppy painter, not only a careless one. I'm going to create an illusion that we have a perfect wall trim match. Let me show you how I do it. As I do it, I'll talk. I'm going to paint the trim red by making a straight line with my tape and eliminating the unevenness of the guy getting the paint onto the trim and not getting it onto the trim, this waviness. So what I have to do is see the distance to which he made his mess from the wall out onto the trim. And usually it's about 1/8 of an inch. Anything beyond that, I'm not going to do. So I'm going to give myself 1/8 of an inch of trim to make it red. And therefore I'll cover 95% of his curvy, swervy lines. And this is how you do it. You take the tape, you implant it here, and then you manipulate it with your thumb and other hand like this. And when you see it go where you want it, you press down right here, and then you just do that. We'll do it again. Now you see this red paint here? That's 1/4 of an inch from the wall. We're not going to paint 1/4 of an inch. That's ridiculous. But we will do it up to 1/8 or so. You see how I'm going to make it nice and straight? It'll look very nice. And then the homeowner is very happy. So, let's do it down here. Can you zoom in here? We're going to finish off this corner here. And we will complete it with a couple of pieces of tape. So that's one. You don't want to try to make one piece of tape do everything, because you wind up with a crooked line. Look at that. So there you have it. Now, I want to show you something else. Clear caulking goes on white, but it dries translucent, transparent. We take clear caulking. Don't use white unless you're painting white. You want clear because after it dries, when you pull the tape away, you're going to have an edge of caulking that was against the tape, that couldn't get painted because it was against the tape. Let me show you what I mean. Now, we're going to fill this in. I know it's going on white, but it's not white. What are we doing here? We are clogging the tape. We're pushing this caulking up against the tape. And why is that? Not that I would use a chip brush to paint, but when you do this, the red paint is going to bleed under the tape. Somebody will say, oh, Spencer, come on, use frog tape, it swells up. I've never used it, but I heard it does a good job. Once again, we're clogging the tape and we're creating a perfect seam. And I'm going to show you that it's perfect, just to prove my point. We're going to take red paint and we're going to paint it right now. Okay, let's get this going. Okay, so now, come in close, please. I want to show them how I want them to push the paint.
Okay. I'm zoomed in.
Now, here's the trick with this. You got to use a lot of paint. Okay? Why do we have to use a lot of paint? I'm going to tell you why. You only want to do it once. This is a lot of work, taping and caulking, and you can't leave it on too long. So you want to do the work with one application that normally gets done with two. Okay, now I have put the equivalent of 2 coats of paint. Careful now, if you're not good, it could sag. So now, we want to pull it all the way over. See that? That prevents sagging. What is sagging? Well, This is exaggerated. That's sagging. You put too much paint on, and that's what's gonna happen. It's gonna start running down the wall. You don't want that, I don't want it. And so we drag the brush right across the surface, and now we're ready to show you the results of caulking your trim to make the perfect line, or to make it almost perfect when you have 60, 70-year-old trim in a 100-year-old house. Just follow me with that. Beautiful. Oh, what a beautiful example. Now, folks, can you see the white edge right on my side of the paint here? You see that? That's why you use clear. If you used white, it would stay white. Show them over here. You see how right here, you see how the caulking got under the tape, but the paint didn't get under the tape? That's why you use caulking right there. And that's why you use clear, because if that dries white, you're in trouble. And so it's clear, so that when it dries, it takes on the color of the red paint. And there you have it. If you have any questions about this procedure, I'm using 1-inch masking tape. I'm using a 3M hand masker with 9-inch masking paper. And I'm also using a caulking gun and what's called Alex Plus clear caulking. I highly recommend Alex Plus. It's dense material. If you should use cheap clear caulking, what happens with the clear is that it has no color to it. It tends to be poorly constituted, very flimsy, so it shrinks and then you get holes in your caulking. Please spend the money. If you don't spend at least $3 on caulking, we pay about $1.75 to $2.50 because we buy it in bulk, but this will retail for about $2.50 to $3 depending on where you get it. Don't buy caulking that's cheap, and you too will have a perfectly straight line. Wouldn't you rather have that than a messy crack in between and all of you know? And now our work isn't done. We now have to roll this wall so that this doesn't dry before the rest of the wall. Gotta go, folks. If you like the video, click on like. See you on the next one. Same thing at the ceiling. I tape it. I bring it about a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch away from the crevice where the wall meets the trim. I put my clear caulking in and I go up there right away to get the paint onto the surface. Now, here's the thing. If you're not a professional, you may not realize this. This applies paint differently than this. The sunlight is your worst nightmare. When your sunlight is showing on a wall with a lot of light, you'll see the difference between paint that's been put on with this as opposed to paint that was put on with this. Neither looks bad, but you want it to all look like it was either put on with this or with this. The only way to do that is to do this. With a mildly wet roller, go as close to the tape as you can. Even though the direction is horizontal. At the very top, you will have a roller effect, which is called stipple. At the very top, you can't get the roller there. Unless you want to jam the roller against the tape, which some people do. Can you zoom in on the texture now? Just show them. Now, can they see the texture from that? If you come close, put your hand close to the wall. Yeah. Can you see that through your screen?
Yeah.
Okay, now let them see this. Can they see the difference between the stipple and the brush? Then I've proven my point. You want to get your stipple as close to that tape as possible so that that doesn't happen to you.
What you're looking at is the product of many years of painting. These particular techniques I employ in this video were not learned overnight. It took me years of using very time-consuming techniques, and then I discovered what I share with you in this video. Look at the beauty, look at the precision, look at the crisp lines. You can do this too. Now I'm going to show you the benefits of using a foam roller. Now how about an outside corner like what you're looking at here? How do you make that red look perfectly straight? Well, I'm going to show you how to do it.
How do you fix that? If you do it with a brush, here's what's going to happen. If you do it with a brush, you'll get the white paint back onto the red. Then if you do the red, you'll get the red onto the white. Here's a 4-inch hot dog roller. Doesn't have a lot of paint on it because you don't want a lot of paint on it. You want to bring it right to the edge and move it in short distances back and forth quickly. And watch what happens to the red paint. You start filling it in. You see how the sponge roller just disperses just enough paint onto the surface? You see how that works? As you roll it and you're not getting any results, you press it a little harder and just enough paint comes out from the center of the sponge to fill in where you need to make it straight. Let's do it again. I'm putting the roller on an angle, just about a 45 against that corner. And if you go back in short, quick strokes, you'll start to see that your line is a lot straighter than if you had gone slow. With steady pressure, you'll see that your stroke fills in those areas that need to get filled in. And you determine how much of that material comes out by your pressure.
Friends, as we draw this video to its close, I hope you've learned a lot from it. Use it as a reference. Go back to it. Email it to yourself so that if you've learned something today and you use it today, if you don't paint that frequently, have a way of getting back to the video. That's what I do. Sometimes I email myself a video with the title so that I know where to go in order to learn how to do something again. Please click on like and subscribe to my channel. A lot of people watch my videos, but they forget to hit that like button. Thank you.